So past success does not guarantee future performance. Having spent over a decade in the financial services industry, this disclaimer is one I'm very familiar with. A variation of this disclosure is tacked on to every piece of investment-related collateral because A, it's legally required by the SEC, and B, it's just good advice. As human beings, it's natural for us to want to repeat the past, especially if it worked out well for us thus far. Unfortunately, refusing to change course based on shifting times and new information is often the reason businesses and firms that once led their industry become irrelevant. So founded as a small mail order retailer in the 1880s, Sears went on to launch Craftsman Tools, Kenmore Appliances, and Allstate Insurance. Sears was the nation's largest retailer and its largest employer. By the 70s, companies like Walmart, Kmart, and Target began to chip away at the retail giant's foothold. And in 2018, Sears filed for bankruptcy and has closed more than 3,500 stores. George Eastman founded Kodak in 1888, revolutionized photography technology, and was responsible for making photography available to the general population. In 1976, Kodak had 85% market share in cameras and 90% market share in film. Kodak engineers invented the digital camera and initially dominated the digital camera market, though they maintained their business focus around film and ultimately declared bankruptcy in 2012. Before the term baby boom was a common phrase, Charles Lazarus returned from World War II and recognized all his friends were about to have a bunch of babies and decided to open a baby furniture store. And in 1957, he opened the first big box toy store. As it went national, Toys R Us drove many competitors out of business and gobbled up others. Ultimately, Toys R Us became a casualty of the big box model it helped create, suddenly surpassed by discounters like Walmart and Target and online sites like Amazon and smaller merchants with better quality and better service. The first Blockbuster opened in 1985 and differentiated themselves from other video rental stores with the largest selection of VHS tapes and modern computerized checkout processes. By 1988, they were the leading video store chain in the US, and in 1994, Viacom bought the company for $8.4 billion. Blockbuster's business model included millions of dollars in revenue from late fees, prompting the birth of Netflix, a company that would send you DVDs and not charge late fees. From 2003 to 2005, Blockbuster lost 75% of its market value. And today there is one Blockbuster store and it's been converted into an Airbnb. So we can contrast that with Bauer, the hockey equipment company. Last year, they switched from making gear for the ice to creating medical gear inspired by protection for athletes. They've designed medical shields for total facial protection to help the community stay safe both on and off the ice. While electronic retailers Walmart and Costco remained open at the onset of the pandemic, Best Buy closed its 1,000 stores while they came up with a plan to keep employees and customers safe. 48 hours later, it raced to convert stores into outposts for shoppers to pick up their online orders without getting out of their cars. They converted the stores to fulfillment centers to ship online orders to customers' homes. And with everyone working from home, they converted or focused on virtual support and technology repair. Yelp started in 2004 as an automated system to ask friends for direct recommendations, an idea that was falling flat with audiences despite $1 million round of funding from a PayPal co-founder. Still, the founders noticed users were writing reviews of local businesses just for fun and decided to pivot Yelp into the platform it is today with over 100 million monthly visitors and more than $1 billion of annual revenue. And lastly, it's hard to imagine YouTube as anything but the massively successful video streaming service it is today. But in its early days, it was nowhere near as successful, originally developed as a video dating service. And YouTube pivoted and slowly turned itself into the empire that Google acquired for $65 billion. So while these are all examples of consumer companies, there are many examples of law firms that are no longer around today Because they did not adapt to changing times.
Today, one of the things that we want to discuss with you is the fact that whatever our perception of the current landscape is, may be very different from those who we're serving, whether it's our clients, our prospects, referral sources. And so the information that we present, we hope you will use to identify where the opportunities in the market are and position yourself in a way that you can realize and grow your practice as a result. Why don't we go ahead with some very brief introductions? Joseph, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. My name is Joseph Welch. I'm an equity shareholder at Buchalter. It's a firm with about 300 lawyers and 9 offices. I've been a shareholder for about 5 years. As an associate, I had $1 million book, and so they made me shareholder. I am the co-chair of the firm's agribusiness, agri-finance department, and I'm the chair of the CLA's standing committee on agribusiness.
Thank you. Lana.
Hello, I'm Lana Manganello with Equinox Strategy Partners. I work with law firms and attorneys on business development and marketing strategies, primarily through coaching and training.
And I'm Jonathan Fitzgerald, managing partner of Equinox Strategy. We work with law firms across the country, developing practices and books of business for the firm's partners and rising stars. To kick off our conversation today, we'd like to first discuss the current state of where we're at. And so, Joseph, I'm going to turn the first question to you. There seems to be a common conversation going around about what back to work looks like once everyone's vaccinated and perhaps heading back into the office or not. Will you give us a sense of what you've got planned for your own practice? What does that look like? Are you going to continue to work virtually? Do you have clients that are requesting that you go and see them again like you did prior to the pandemic? Give us a sense for that.
Yeah, great question. So I think the more important thing is the question, right? I think there's no one answer to this, but being flexible and meeting the demands and needs of your clients, of courts, of your firms, I think that's really the important rub here. As a shareholder at my firm, we received a questionnaire recently that I think the vast majority of shareholders filled out, but it was like, 30 to 50 questions on specifics. How big is your team? Do you want them there in person? How many days do you plan on being in the office? How productive do you think you are? How many days should you be in the office to have your own dedicated office, right? I think it's important just to look at where we are and talking with your clients and others who now have flexibility we didn't before. I'll admit I never used Zoom before the pandemic. And now I don't know that there's a day that I don't. Zoom or Teams or something else. So I think the important thing is if you have a hearing in Delaware or you have something to do across the country, asking whether a virtual format is available or possible can help manage the expectation, right? So that you're not hopping on a plane and spending 10 plus hours in transit that could have been accomplished through a Zoom meeting or a call that way. So I think my personal feel is, I think Tuesday through Thursday, I'll be in the office probably every week, barring vacations. But Mondays and Fridays, I'll have much more flexibility. There'll be Fridays where I don't need to be in the office and I'll take calls remotely. I have plenty of clients who now love the option of Zoom, and they send me links where now wherever they are, we Zoom in together and we see each other and it's not just a voice. So I think whatever you ultimately decide, listening to the constituencies that matter is what you should do in adjusting your own schedule as to what to do and how to do it.
And in terms of your clients' preferences, Joseph, do you find that your mere suggestion of jumping on a Zoom instead of jumping on a plane seems to direct them in a way that you want them? Or are they really proactive about saying, hey, let's just jump on a Zoom. There's no need for you to drive up to LA or to fly out to Delaware to make it happen?
I think there's both. I've had some meetings where they're sensitive in nature, where they want me in the same room and something about looking at me on a screen is not the same. So I've had some of that, but I like offering in the first instance, the ability to do this at the lowest cost to them. If they see that, look, guys, we need to meet, we need to chat, happy to send a Zoom link as kind of my default, then let them say, no, for this one, let's meet in person. They don't question the bill then if we're in person, right?
Yeah.
So I think giving them the option is really important, but I think the default is typically, a virtual format.
Some of this may be age or generational related too. Usually more senior professionals really prefer that in-person connection, and younger professionals are just naturally conditioned to jump on a Zoom call or to somehow utilize technology for efficiencies. And so we may take all of that in consideration too, but I like your idea of suggesting Zoom out of the gate as your default. And then in the event that someone wants something different, they can pay for it. This probably leads us to our first poll of the webinar. We're trying to get a sense for how workloads have changed over the course of the dynamic. Do we want pandemic rather? Do we want to launch that one? So poll number 1, when is it safe to get back together? I want to work remotely full-time, work remote, mostly work remote. Probably should say something other than mostly, and then work in the office full-time. So if you want to go ahead and take a second to weigh in there.
Yeah, the third option should be work in an office mostly.
Got it. Okay. So let's see where you guys are here. We'll give you a couple more seconds. If we want to end the polling and go ahead with the results, it looks like remote versus in the office is neck to neck, with in the office actually being a little bit more. So as much as we moan and complain about having to drive into the office, it may be the better alternative to all the distractions that we have wherever we're working remotely. That leads us to our second poll, which we can go ahead and throw up here. Since the pandemic last March, your workload and job demands have decreased substantially, decreased a little, stayed the same, increased a little, increased substantially. Give you a couple seconds there to weigh in. This is also kind of interesting. Most of the clients that I've interacted with over the last year, if anything, have complained about having too much work on their desk, and with all the other distractions, how the heck are they going to get everything accomplished? But it looks like, again, decrease substantially and increase substantially are at about the same level, and decreased a little is right in there too. So it's interesting to see that it's as polarized as it is.
Great. So I think this is a good time to kind of discuss a little more about what the current state of the professional landscape looks like. So in March of 2020, more than 80% of the world's workforce went into lockdown. And in a recent study from the Pew Research Center, 54% of employed adults say they want to work from home after the outbreak ends. And 68% of people with a postgraduate degree report that they can do their work from home. In a 2020 Harvard Business Review survey, 56% of professionals responded that they have increased job demand since the pandemic. 25% of those people felt unable to maintain a strong connection with family since the pandemic. 39% reported feeling unable to maintain strong connections with colleagues, and 50% said they were unable to maintain a strong connection with their friends. So workplace burnout has been a significant issue since well before the pandemic. There are many factors to burnout, including workload, perceived lack of control and autonomy, reward, leadership, and community. And the pandemic has certainly intensified these issues. In a survey from Harvard Business Review, millennials reported having the highest level of burnout, and much of this is due to having less autonomy at work, lower seniority, greater financial stressors, and feelings of loneliness. And isolation and disconnect at work has been especially pronounced during the pandemic. In her book, The Burnout Epidemic, burnout researcher Jennifer Moss reports that 1 in 5 millennials have 0 friends. She highlights that having friends in your professional life leads to higher job satisfaction. Having a close friend at work makes it 50% more likely that you'll stay at that job, and also increases productivity and the likelihood of a promotion. Studies also show that loneliness is worse for your health than diabetes and can have similar effects to your health and longevity as smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Maybe it's not just millennials. I feel like the older I get, the less friends I have too. My heart goes out to the millennials on the webinar. I feel your pain. I think what Lana's trying to get at with some of these statistics is, despite the efficiencies and how convenient it is to have all of this virtual connection or working virtually or remotely or whatever, there's still a certain level of basic human action that all of us seek. And Joseph, I'm curious, from your practice perspective, we've all been in kind of a lockdown state for the last year. Have you had clients that have requested any kind of in-person interaction, or have you done any of that despite the fact that the rest of the world has been on lockdown?
Yeah, so I'll first speak to kind of the burnout. I remember early on, my oldest son said, "Dad, are you working from home or living at work?" And I thought about that and said, you know what? Living at work sounds miserable, you know? And so I think there's a point where I have to say I'm working from home and put it in that type of a box for me. As to individuals, I found not everyone has the same comfort level. You know, there are people, many of my clients are in the food industry and they're essential workers and they're at work and they're in the office and they, you know, they still eat meals and they still interact with people and their lives continue. And so one of the things I did, you know, early in this pandemic is I looked at my wife and said, let's do a road trip. Let's go visit a bunch of our clients up and down, you know, the coast and take them gift cards. And I would email in advance the, you know, the senior management and say, where do these people like to shop? And can I bring them a meal? And it was just rewarding those essential workers with a visit, not billing anyone for anything, and just chatting with them, letting them know that their relationship matters to me. It's not another number, it's not another bill, but I want to know about their families and I want to know about their needs. And I want to be as approachable as possible to anyone who has the authority, especially to pick up the phone and say, I need your help. And I think that's something that we can't lose sight of, pandemic or otherwise, that people have a basic need to connect with one another. And so for me, it was a road trip, one of my most successful road trips, because I got to talk with people. I got to see them in their offices, something that frankly, I hadn't done before, but this gave me an opportunity to go visit them.
So this is a takeaway for all our millennials. For those of you that feel very lonely and don't have any friends, we've just learned that Joseph gets all of his friends by bribing them with gift cards and things that they really like.
Absolutely.
And it seems to work. In all seriousness, being so thoughtful about the people that you serve, and I've heard this from a number of clients during the last year too, it seems like despite the fact that we're not always or regularly face-to-face with some of these folks, relationships have actually grown deeper and gotten better as a result of perhaps the shared experience or the fact that we have to be more proactive and intentional about our outreach. Have you also noticed, Joseph, that through your proactive outreach to clients and referral sources, that this line between total professional and total personal is now more blurred than ever before?
Yeah, I think so. You know, I'm married to the most beautiful, wonderful woman on the planet. And anytime I can bring my clients in a setting where she's there, it is the ultimate win, right? She gets to know them. She talks to them. They get to know her. I mean, she's just fascinating on every level. And then she's the one who looks at me saying, I want to go out to dinner with them again. When are you setting that up, right? And she doesn't care how busy I am or how many hours I'm working. It's what are you doing to take this relationship to the next level so that I'm meeting all of their spouses and we're, getting box seats somewhere or doing something. I think every person needs a marketing choir. It's not a time for soloists, right? The managing partner of your firm may be a great soloist, right? There may be clients that have needs, but I think the more you surround yourself with people who care about your business and professional development, the better. And some of my best contacts have been reaching out to a client I've had for years saying, I could use your help. I know you guys market in a space. Where do you think I should be? Can you give me some help there? And people like to be on the other end of I'm willing to help you call, right? And I think there's times where we don't ask those questions, but we have clients prepared to answer them. Joseph, I think you're great at this and you should get to know these people because these are the people we eat lunch with. You mean I can get to know your friends and you can introduce me to them and you pay my bill? Like, why wouldn't I do that? Right? And I think there's times where you can really deepen the relationship, especially if you stand out. If you do what others aren't, right? One option is during the pandemic, watch a ton of Netflix, right? That's not the option that I think pays dividends, right? But there are other options to say, the lawyer that you've worked with for 20, 30 years, who you haven't seen, who hasn't contacted you, who won't offer to visit you, I just like to come over and say hi. Right. And I think there's people who put those pieces together that relationships matter and effort matters. And so, yeah, I think people who make the effort get the deeper relationship that works for everyone.
Yeah, and it happens differently for different folks. This idea of having a marketing choir, though, I think is a really smart one. We oftentimes don't think about using our clients and referral sources as sounding boards, when in fact, they may have a different perspective. That's what we're talking about on today's webinar is there a different perspective out there and how do we do a better job of positioning ourselves to realize the opportunities that come with that? And so by asking those questions, not only might you get some great advice, but to Joseph's point, it also deepens the relationship. And we know through statistics and science that a deeper relationship means more loyalty from the people that you serve. And that's, I think, something that we're all achieving. Lana, what does all of this mean in terms of change?
Well, I think it's helpful to look at relationships a little further and the role of technology. So automation and technological advances have improved efficiency and productivity in the legal space dramatically. Let's do a screen share. So technology and research advisory firm Gartner recently did a study, and they found that 1/3 of all current jobs in the legal space will be automated by 2025. And legal technology like e-discovery and case management tools have created this increased efficiency. And this is a good thing. Client needs are getting more and more complex. So this automation allows for legal professionals to spend more of their time on strategic thinking and being innovative and coming up with solutions for their clients' ever-changing problems. And now with communication platforms, lawyers and clients can talk to each other through email, messaging, voicemail, video conferencing, and it is becoming less and less common or necessary for clients to actually come to a lawyer's office. So we hear quite a bit about Zoom fatigue and Zoom gloom, but the Pew Research Center found that 65% of professionals working from home say that Zoom is actually a great substitute for meeting in real life, and 63% of those who are using video conferencing reported they were not, in fact, feeling worn out by it. So they actually prefer it to, meetings. And I think there was a lot of research prior to the pandemic that people felt like meeting in person or meetings in general were pretty inefficient.
So yeah, there's this perception out there that in order to build a relationship, it has to be in person. And I think some of the statistics that Lana just shared with us further demonstrate that it's less about the physicality of things and more about your ability to build trust. These are 6 elements of trust. We'd like to go through them very, very quickly, just so that you get a sense for whether you're in person or interacting with someone virtually. How do these 6 different elements play a role in the relationship process? So in terms of the first one, competency, for someone to trust you, there has to be a certain level of competency. For someone to rely on your advice, take your advice, and want to work with you, a certain amount of competency has to exist. And I think that's best demonstrated if an attorney is willing, for marketing purposes, to suggest that they have some kind of a special focus or a true specialty. And so,
Jonathan, just to jump in here, I think it's so important and so easy to do online, right? Look at your website, look at your bio. Do people know that if they have a matter for you, that they can read that on your website and say, this is a perfect fit for this person, right? Like, I think that with a good marketing department, with some time, with your website, you could make huge inroads into competency. I mean, personally, as a younger associate, I realized that my ability to bring in business was limited. Even though I had a lower hourly rate, I couldn't really sell the same competency as a seasoned partner. And so one of the things I remember doing was going to the State Bar of California and jumping through all the hoops, taking an extra test, doing the application to become a certified bankruptcy specialist. Now, that doesn't mean a whole bunch necessarily within a big firm, but to many of my clients, it does. They're saying, look, at a lower hourly rate, the state of California is going to call you an expert. Yeah, I'll try you. I'll give this a shot. And if you highlight through representative matters the things that you do and you want online, that's, I think, where most of the people are fishing, right? Make it easy. Make it easy for them to connect what they need with what you do.
And so, Joseph, that's a lot easier said than done. Most of us approach, without good marketing advice, our default is to approach marketing from a generic standpoint. Let me just throw everything at the wall and pray to God that something sticks. What you're suggesting is 180 degrees separate from that. What you're saying is our online presence gives us an opportunity to say, here, world, target audience, is when you should really think of me. Yeah, I'm good for all this other stuff and I'm able to accomplish all this other stuff too, but here's where I can really add value. And through representative matters, through professional organizations or networks that you're a part of, or associations with things, making sure that whether someone lands on your LinkedIn profile or your law firm bio, they're not likely to land on both when they're doing due diligence on you. But regardless of which one they land on, they get a really good picture of the value that you're able to provide.
Yeah, I think that's key. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that people of all ages run into is not having a real section on representative matters, deals and cases. I think of all the things you could tell someone who's fishing in the market for a good lawyer is that you handle specifically what they're looking for. I mean, my own will talk about, a $1 billion deal I did in one, produce area, hundreds of millions in asset-based lending related to various fruits and vegetables. Like, I'm putting in highlights of the things that I think really matter to the people who are looking for me, because I want to attract the clients that want the things that I do. It's nice to sell one of my partners and one of my colleagues, but if you know some of the last 10 major deals that I've done and you're looking for a good lawyer in that space, let's talk, right? And so to build that competency, not just where did I go to law school and how well did I do, but these are the deals that I'm actively handling. So there's not a big learning curve. Let's talk. And I think that competency is so easy to establish with really good marketing, and it has to be nimble. I will tell you, when I'm going to pitch a really big client, I will change my bio outward facing to the entire public to get to that client in hopes that they read my bio and see this is exactly the first bullet point of what I need someone to do. And magically, that's Joseph's first major point. right? If you're nimble and you can move with people and have a marketing team that will work with you, you have all the advantage.
And by the way, websites and LinkedIn profiles, regardless of the size of your firm or the size of your practice, in our opinion, are absolutely critical. People, if they get referred to you by even a very trusted advisor, the first thing that person's likely to do is to throw your name into Google to see what Google knows about you. If we're suggesting Joseph is the next best thing to sliced bread as it relates to agribusiness law, I'm still going to Google him to see if Google realizes that too. If there's all kinds of competency on Joseph that results from the Google search, now all of a sudden it has reaffirmed what the referral source, why the referral source sent me Joseph's way. If the referral source is telling me Joseph's the next best thing to slice bread and Google knows nothing about Joseph, the website is generic, the LinkedIn profile isn't filled out, there are no articles or speaking or other thought leadership about him, in my mind as a prospect, I'm going to think automatically to myself, this is interesting. Maybe I need a couple other names because I'm not so sure I want to risk whatever is at stake by hiring Joseph. I might need a couple other names. That perfectly leads us to the second element of trust, which is this congruency and authenticity. If your messaging does not directly support the type of work you want more of, you will miss those opportunities, folks. People will land on your profile, LinkedIn or firm bio, and it will be so generic or so ill-messaged that someone won't really be convinced that you're the person. And that's when they ask for more references, or they think to themselves, I'll think about it, and then they never end up doing that. If in fact Joseph wants more of this type of work, the messaging has to support that. And it has to be authentic. When Joseph talks about changing his online profiles for an upcoming gig, it's not in a menacing way in the hopes of pulling the wool over on someone's eyes. He's got the credibility to back it up. What he's suggesting is he's just further refining and repurposing his skill set to meet that demand that is out there. We should all be doing that. I think that leads us to our third element of trust, which is this idea of fairness. What are we doing as service professionals to give to the community and to give to the people that we're serving before we have that expectation of get?
Yeah. So Jonathan, I'm going to pause you here. I think we miss this so often because lawyers in general are short-sighted. I think we want a billing number, right? We know
I'm glad you're saying that and I'm not.
But it's so unfortunate that I find that when you pay it forward, when you talk to a client and say, reach out to me no matter what the issue is, I'm always happy to give you a free 20, 30 minutes, whatever it is. Of course, you have to cut off abuse, right? My point is not to be abused, but it is to be an open resource, because if you are fair to the process and fair to people who want to know that you can tackle the big issues, get the billable number for something that you really directly handle and can help them with. But if you get to know people and you're fair with them, right? And if they have an issue with your bill, address it, right? I mean, talk to them, write something off, But I think the idea is if you can talk with people, not only to build the relationship in the first instance, but to keep the relationship, right? To pay some of this forward, to treat them well, to get to know them in authentic ways. I think that's really important. And someone in the chat said, we know our millennials, what would we recommend, for millennials to keep in touch with clients in a genuine and comfortable way? I think it really depends on the client and depends on you. What's natural for you may not be what's natural for me, but more importantly, the client, right? The more I listen to my clients, the more I know what interests them, right? I have clients that live in Canada and have, needs up there. And there's times where around the election, they really wanted to talk about US politics, right? Cool. I wouldn't have forced that on anyone, but they wanted to know, what do you think, right? I think if you're willing to be more than a computer screen, more than a, LinkedIn profile, more than a like, the more you know the people in your audience, the better you tailor what you tell them in an authentic, genuine way. The best way to do that, get to know them better.
And that get to know you is the perfect opening to the next element of trust, which is this openness and vulnerability. We hear vulnerability and all of a sudden it sounds weak, it sounds compromising. But I think what we're really talking about here is making sure that the relationship we have with the people that we serve or who we want to serve is not strictly professional. They have a window or a view into our life as a human being, because that's what they are, that is more than just, I'm this rigid lawyer that can only provide value here. Have you experienced that as well, Joseph?
Yeah, and I've even done it accidentally. Like, to be totally candid, I have a client with the same first name as my mother-in-law. And recently I was sending out pictures, that we took as a family at the beach to all of the family. And instead of my mother-in-law, I sent it to the client. And the best part of that is like the following day when I was on the phone with the client, she said, "Did you mean to send me a bunch of pictures of your kids?" And I said, "No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, but I know why that happened." And they were like, "Oh, they were awesome. You've got the cutest kids." And we connected at a different level because this person realized I was sending out pictures and I've got cute kids. And I think there's times where, we often put up barriers and walls to relationships that don't need to be there, right? I'm not saying to, fake text people as an accident, but for me, it worked. And I think there's times where we impose higher walls than there should be because clients also want interaction. Every time they talk to you doesn't have to be on the clock and doesn't have to be a specific legal issue. Sometimes they just want to know what your weekend was like and what makes you tick. And in this instance, it was open, it was vulnerable, and it was an accident, but it's really helped the relationship.
Yeah, I love it. In terms of transparency for building trust, what we're really talking about here is setting mutual expectations with those that you serve, making sure that you're on the same page, you understand what their needs are, and you're able to let them know what all or what not you're able to accomplish for them. In terms of the last one, reliability and dependability, what we're essentially talking about here, folks, is follow up and follow through. There are a lot of professionals out there that promise the world and then they under deliver every single day of the calendar year. And nothing can be a bigger inhibitor to trust than to say you're going to do something and you don't follow through. It's interesting. I did my first in-person law firm retreat earlier this week. Quite frankly, it felt bizarre to do it. But the managing partner had reached out to us ahead of time and said, "I regularly talk about business development with my team. They're good on the basics. We want you to wow us with something super creative and super new." And so, of course, we delivered. And the last thing that I asked each of the attendees to do was to give us kind of their aha moment from the discussion. And what was so interesting is despite the fact that all these folks had tons of business development and sales training as lawyers, what their aha moment from the discussion was, for the most part, was, "Jonathan, I got to do a better job of follow up and follow through. There are just so many things on my plate that unless I keep a really detailed list of things that I have promised people, it just never happens." This is a big one, folks. And although we're not going to spend a half an hour talking about it, doing a better job of following up and following through will definitely position you for the opportunities that are out there. Now, we've talked about all kinds of ways of building trust virtually, but there's still a benefit of doing things in person. Lana, will you take us through what some of those are quickly?
Yes. So, even on the terms of follow up and follow through, leveraging technology to do all of the things that we just discussed makes everyone a lot more efficient. But there, like Jonathan said, really valuable reasons to get together in person. So let's talk through what that is. So having a Zoom meeting or a conference in the calendar doesn't get anyone too excited, with the exception of this webinar, which I'm sure you've all been anxiously awaiting. But having an actual meeting scheduled gives a sense of anticipation you just don't get from an upcoming virtual event. And another benefit of being physically with others is that it is a lot less tempting to multitask. So when you're in a conference room collaborating with two colleagues, it's unlikely you'll start reading your emails or finishing your online shopping list. And there's usually less interruptions. You get out of your house and you don't have to worry about your kids barging in asking for snacks or your dog losing his mind on the Amazon guy. And meeting in real life, there's less of a reliance on tech, and malfunctioning technology is less likely to take away from a discussion, a presentation, or a pitch. And when tech is not a critical part of your meeting, it's easier to present your best self. You know, people can hear you, no one's screaming, Carol, you're on mute, and there aren't those awkward delays, and you spend less energy worrying about the Wi-Fi going down or the trash truck interrupting you, or even, you know, the drain of staring at yourself, analyzing yourself throughout a meeting. So you actually can spend all your energy listening and thinking when you're in a meeting. And, you know, variety is the spice of life. So changing up your daily routine and taking in new sights and sounds is appreciated by most people. Being able to enjoy your surroundings with some food and drinks can also make for a much more enjoyable experience than being alone. And when we're in person, it's a lot easier to read body language. And when meeting as a group, it's less likely that the most boisterous personality will commandeer the conversation and you can have side conversations. And I think the most important one that I didn't write is when you make a joke in person, you can actually hear, you know, the chuckles, even if people are just being nice. So there are certainly really great reasons to get back together. And I think that the real key is takeaway is to kind of build a foundation of trust and use in-person meetings to elevate those relationships.
Yeah, thank you for that, Lana. Delivering on the title of our webinar today, we do want to get to what does the future look like from a business development perspective. And I think to kick us off, let's talk about what networking looks like. We now know that we can network virtually and be successful. Hopefully we've all learned that in the last year. We all know that there's an element of being in person, which has its benefits too. Joseph, do you have specific examples or an example that you can share about how you've been able to expand your network over the last year, despite the fact that you can't be in front of your clients or prospects at the extent that you might otherwise?
Yeah. I think an important thing to do is to join organizations that matter to you and to your clients. I look at where my clients are members of, and I join those and say, hey, look, I'm their lawyer. Let's get to know each other. And I think there is real opportunity there. But to an earlier point about dependability, reliability, I'm the chair of the agribusiness section for the CLA. You, when you do anything, should do your best, right? There are people who I'll never send a billable matter to because I know what they do without one, right? And there are people who do such a good job in a service volunteer capacity that I can't wait to refer someone to them because I can't imagine how amazing they are to take care of a client that I have a conflict on, right? I think you have to realize you are always on. Your commercial is always running. And if you're going to join networking groups virtually, stand out, volunteer for stuff. Oh, I can do that. You know, pay it forward. You know, if you join a new organization, be part of the recruiting committee, right? Get to know as many people as you can. I think there's things that we pass up on because we assume that, you know, we can't do it if it's in a virtual platform. I've sent out emails when I join a group. Hey, I'm new to the group. I'd love to get to know you and what your connection is to this group. How can I be a resource for you? I mean, a short email where I let them know I'm new to the group, I'm paying the dues, right? I'm getting to know you, but how can I be a sounding board? How can I be a resource? Not asking them in the first instance, how can you serve me? I mean, some people, I think, miss the point that paying it forward of saying, listen, I'm part of this group because I care about the collective efforts, and I'm here to volunteer in a way that sets me apart as one who cares about the bigger picture. I think there's real valuable ways to network in this environment, but whatever you do, do well.
And those of you that are doing well in a networking environment that we're in right now, it's likely because you've also honed your message to where it's very clear the value that you provide. And the clearer your message is, the better you're going to understand who are the gatekeepers in the business community that can send that type of work your way. If you're all things to all people, no one's going to think of you for anything. But if there's something specific and memorable to a gatekeeper, when that issue arises, you're likely to get that call or that email every single time. By the way, for any of you that might be interested, Lana and I have a checklist you can email us for that's a list of kind of best practices when networking virtually. We'd be happy to share that with you. Lana will put our contact information in chat, or we've got an ending slide that has it too, but it may be helpful for you to either refresh your memory or things that you've not considered before to do as you're trying to do a better job of networking. So that's kind of networking. From a conference perspective, we've heard for years and years and years that content is king. People went to conferences to hear the speaker, to get the slide deck. Now that all of that information can be available virtually, we're big believers that people will go to conferences in person for the experience. It's a location that they want to experience. It's an individual that's going to be there that they want to have an experiential experience with. And that's why they would actually travel and spend the time to get there, because they're not going to get that virtually. They're not going to get that in the online medium. And so just as we used to think content is king, now the experience is king. If you're part of those conferences, planning those conferences moving forward, you can't help but think to yourself, what kind of an experience do we want to create that will bring that pull to us? Otherwise, we're going to throw it up on Zoom and people can get the content from wherever they're coming to us virtually. The other thing too is, for those of you that prior to the pandemic were regularly involved in inviting people to breakfast, lunch, happy hour, dinners, all that kind of stuff, I think the future of those types of meetings probably starts out with a Zoom call. You don't have to drive across town to meet someone for breakfast. You don't have to come back to the office after having one or two cocktails for happy hour. Those new relationships are likely to start moving forward over some kind of a video medium. And then once you've decided, yeah, I'd like to get to know Joseph or Lana a little bit more, then you start to suggest the more in-person interactions, because you've determined, hey, Joseph's got something of value that I want. And by the way, we hit it off from a chemistry perspective. I want to take the relationship to the next level. I want to move it into something in person. Any other best practices we should consider, Lana, when meeting folks?
I think, just in general, our tolerance for wasting time has gone down dramatically. And so we just need to do everything better. And so I think that leads us to, best practices on professional meetings. So I think, let's get into this. Whether you're meeting in person or on video, there's things you can do to make sure that you're getting the most out of your meetings, keeping it short, knowing what you're meeting about and making sure everyone also knows and is prepared. Start and end when you say you're going to. Do your best to make the meeting interactive and avoid tangents. Make sure you're actually providing value. Take notes. And make sure next steps are clear and always follow through on what you say you're going to do, which we're going to keep pounding into this into this presentation, because it really is, technology or no technology, something that makes you creates a differentiator for you and your services.
The last section that we'd like to address is this idea of repositioning to meet current demands, and whether it's repurposing a skill set that you have or learning something new altogether, there's probably a little bit of both of those items that requires us to anticipate what our target market is going to need to be able to deliver on it. Joseph, how have you been able to anticipate what people either in bankruptcy, insolvency, or an agribusiness might need in order to be able to deliver it for them?
So I didn't know I would share this, but when I was about 11 or so years old, I was playing Nintendo, and my mom came and said, "What do you want to do in life?" Right? I mean, literally, I was playing Nintendo, right? And she said, my mom, just so you know, has 2 doctorate degrees, including a law degree. She practiced law, multiple master's degrees. She's absolutely brilliant. And I said, "I want to be a cardiac surgeon." Well, I mean, you realize that didn't work out for me, but she looked at me and said, "Listen, let me tell you my formula. What you do now times time equals destiny." The time is the constant. What directly affects your destiny is what you do now. And so my mom said the reason she went to law school was she realized 3 or 4 years from the time she applied, she'd be 3 or 4 years older anyway. So why not have a law degree, right? At the beginning of the pandemic, I was not licensed in Washington or Oregon. By the end of the pandemic, around now, I am. In the last year, I got licensed in these 2 other states just to expand my network. I've got law firm colleagues in those 2 offices. Why not support their business, right? A year from now, we're all going to be a year older, hopefully. We make it. So the idea is, what do we do to repurpose, to rebrand, to add skills that we don't yet have? But staying stagnant is not a plan. Hope is not a plan, right? So I think the idea is, what are the things you're prepared to do to distinguish yourself, to bring in business, to widen the net? I think you've got to look at where you are and determine what makes sense. If your firm has offices in other states, maybe get licensed in other states if you're unique in your practice. For me, bankruptcy was big, but for the last 10 plus years hasn't been as robust as I'd like, right? So I looked at agribusiness. I looked at food law. I looked at trends and said, you know what? I'm going to read books on this. I'm going to understand security interests and crops and other things. And there's a close enough nexus where I can be the insolvency expert who knows a ton about food law and provide services in both of those areas, right? While the jack of all trades is a master of none, you should find subspecialties that you can really hit on, because that's a great way to bring in business. People are looking for that cross section of insolvency when there's not enough to go around, and food law, which is a burgeoning practice. I think the idea is, what you do now times destiny, or times time equals destiny. You really have to focus on what you do now if you intend to change the trajectory of where you're going.
Yeah, and it sounds like, Joseph, you mentioned a story early on in the webinar where you used your differentiator to compete as an associate. And it sounds like as your career continues to grow and expand, you just continue to get even more specialized and niche-y, because that's what's working. That's what's helping your growth. And even though that sounds scary to a lot of us on the webinar, Lana, in my experience, is those service professionals who are willing to niche and specialize and focus, at least for marketing purposes, on something more than just the general litigator or general transaction, their practices are growing by double digits every single year. And I think one of the benefits of having an in-house marketing department or using outside consultants like us, we can ask the awkward questions. We can say, well, Joseph, it's nice that we're in the middle of the pandemic, but that doesn't give you reason to sit at home and watch Netflix waiting for the weather to blow over. There are additional things you can do. Sometimes that kind of advice comes best from a third party. You take less offense to the awkward questions or to the awkward suggestions when it comes from someone who really has your best interest in mind. Otherwise, they wouldn't bring it up. With the few minutes that we have left, Lana, will you take us through some additional ways of building our visibility and credibility online?
Sure. So, we talked quite a bit about your online presence and the value of it, even if your practice is fully referral based. So, we really want to ensure that the internet is reflecting the true professional that you are, and that when someone does that inevitable Google search, they are wholly confirmed that you're the ideal person for the matter at hand. So we talked a lot already about making sure your website and firm bio highlight the types of matters that you want more of. As one of the top results in a Google search, you really do need to pay attention to your LinkedIn profile and make sure that also is reflecting the professional that you are. And I think it's prudent to take it to the next level and actually engage with your network on LinkedIn. Again, highlighting the types of matters that you're interested in getting more of. Build credibility and visibility with webinars specifically tailored to your audience. You can create a video series or a podcast around an area of your expertise. Writing articles or blogs. Newsletters are also helpful in building credibility. I think a good idea is to offer to write an article for the newsletter of a client or a professional with the same target client profile. Build credibility and expand your exposure by teaming up with a colleague or a client to co-author an article or co-present a webinar. And I think the key to building credibility online is picking a specific theme or a niche that demonstrates your expertise, being consistent in your messaging, and being regular with your engagement.
To close up our conversation today, folks, I want to share with you a quote that I like a lot that says, "Success always comes when preparation meets opportunity." And that's essentially what we've tried to share with you today. The pandemic has forced us to change in ways that we probably would have never expected, and maybe at speeds that we never expected. The better you can do at wrapping your head around some of this change. We're not suggesting flip a switch tomorrow and change 180 degrees. Take a look at the landscape. Have conversations with people in your network. Try to get a sense for what they're experiencing and where you can add value. And the better you can do to position yourself for those opportunities, the better your practice is going to grow, and the better you're going to be seen as that trusted advisor in the business community. Thanks, everybody, for your time today. Thank you, Joseph, for being part of our panel discussion. We've really had a nice time.
Thank you.